All right, welcome to Hoops Tonight here at The Volume. Happy Tuesday, everybody. Hope all of you guys are having a great week. Just have a quick show for you this morning since we only had one game last night. We're going to go over my predictions for the first round of the in-season tournament off the top. Obviously, tomorrow and Thursday's shows will be breakdowns of those games. We're probably going to do some film in those shows as well. But today we'll be doing some predictions. And then a bunch of you guys dropped some really good mailbag questions in the YouTube comments yesterday. We're going to hit some teams, but there's also a lot of big picture basketball concepts that you guys brought up. So it's going to be fun to kind of get into the weeds of the bigger concepts that make this league work. We're going to hit that mailbag, then we'll be out of here for the day. And then, as I said, we will be breaking down the in-season tournament games starting tomorrow. You guys know the drill. Before we get started, subscribe to the Hoops Tonight YouTube channel so you don't miss any more of our videos. Follow me on Twitter at _JasonLT so you guys don't miss show announcements. Don't forget about our podcast feed, wherever you get your podcasts under Hoops Tonight. Don't forget it's also helpful if you leave a rating and a review on our podcast feed. We also have brand new social media feeds on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook for the Hoops Tonight channel where we're releasing more content. Make sure you guys follow us there. And then keep dropping mailbag questions in those YouTube comments. We'll have another mailbag like we always do on Friday towards the tail end of this week. And then last but not least, before we get started, I want to talk to you guys about Game Time. They have the best ticket buying experience, in my opinion. I've used them many times in the past. I highly recommend you guys check it out. And as fun as it is to watch the sports that we watch at home, there's nothing like being there in person, especially when it comes to concerts and comedy shows. So let's get up and let's get out and see a show this year. Game Time has an incredibly user-friendly experience. You can check out in as few as 2 taps. You know exactly what you're spending because they have all-in pricing, and you get a view of your seat within the app, so you know what you're getting with your money. They also have an awesome new feature called Game Time Picks, where they curate the feed. Instead of clicking on an event and seeing just thousands and thousands of tickets, you can see the best deals from that particular event so that you can be more efficient in your hunt for the best available ticket. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time Picks. Download the Game Time app and create an account and use code HOOPS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code HOOPS. That's HOOPS for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. All right, let's talk some basketball. So 4 games. I'm just going to hit the first rounds and then we'll react to the later rounds as they come. Milwaukee over Orlando. Milwaukee's just playing really well right now and Orlando's down their 2 best players. The game is in Milwaukee. So no need to get too much further into that one. Obviously, Orlando has an athleticism advantage on the perimeter, but I don't think it'll be enough to make up for it, especially playing in front of that home crowd. I also think that Milwaukee, similarly to the Lakers last year, after an uneven start to the season, can stamp a level of legitimacy to their, what they've accomplished to this point to mid-December by winning this in-season tournament. I think they should go for it. I talked about this a little bit with Kevin O'Connor yesterday. I went on his show, and I think the in-season tournament's awesome. My favorite team, the Lakers, aren't even in it this year, and I'm still super excited for it. I think anytime as a competitor you have an opportunity to compete for an accolade like this, that you should go for it. I think it's revealing in who you are as a competitor. I think it's revealing in how serious you are as a basketball team. I think everybody should be trying to win this thing, and I think Milwaukee's really going to try to go after it. Dallas OKC. This game is basically a coin flip in a single elimination type of setting. That's the other thing I want to say off the top here. This is single elimination. Anything can happen. The Celtics, who won the championship, and the Lakers were both in the in-season tournament last year, and the Lakers ended up winning the whole damn thing. No one thinks the Lakers are better than the Celtics, right? So in single elimination, there's more, you're at higher risk of variables knocking you out. So anything can happen. I'm just giving you my best predictions, right? But again, for a game like this, I think Dallas, when OKC doesn't have Chet, is a slightly better team. And so that is an advantage in Dallas's favor. But the game is being played in Oklahoma City, so this could really go either way. I think I'm going to go with Dallas, though. OKC has struggled with rim decisions against them in the past. They have a lot of advantages in this particular matchup, especially on the offensive rebounding front, as well as that rim protection. So in the coin flip, I will take Dallas. Atlanta, New York should be a fun one. Atlanta's playing really good ball, and they beat the Knicks earlier this year. But I also think New York has a defensive gear that they can get to in a big game specifically that is better than they've shown this year. And when the chips are down and both teams are at their best, I think the Knicks are a little better on defense, and I think they're a lot better on offense. So I'm going to go with the Knicks. And then Golden State, Houston. I think Golden State's a better team than Houston. And I think they're capable of going in there and strangling Houston's offense. But that crowd is going to be crazy, and Houston is going to play super hard. So I kind of view that game as another coin flip, but I'll go with Golden State at this point. So again, I think New York and Milwaukee should both relatively easily dispatch of Atlanta and Orlando. The Atlanta game might be a little closer, but I think the Knicks will win. And then Dallas, OKC, and Golden State, Houston, as by virtue of the Western Conference and its depth of talent, I think both of those games are basically coin flips, but I'll go with Dallas and Golden State for now, and then I'll give my predictions on the later round games when we get to them. It's the most wonderful time of the year for getting in on all of the hoops, football, and hockey action at DraftKings Sportsbook. In the season of giving, we're being gifted college football and basketball, pro football and basketball, and pro hockey too. Almost 24/7. So many games every day, so many opportunities to place your first bet. Try betting on something simple like picking a team to win. Go to the DraftKings Sportsbook app and place your bet. Current Super Bowl winners on DraftKings right now, the Detroit Lions at plus 260 and the Kansas City Chiefs at plus 425. And here's a gift for all new customers. Bet $5 to get $150 in bonus bets if your bet wins. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code HOOPS. That's HOOPS. That's code HOOPS for new customers to get $150 in bonus bets if your bet wins when you bet just $5. Happy holidays from DraftKings. The crown is yours. All right, a lot of really good questions from you guys today. Let's get into it. Hey, Jason, I'm sure you're tired of Mavs fans in your comments, but something I've noticed is that Luka is playing more off the ball. It looks to be a real development, at least a quarter of the way into the season. He's at much lower usage rate than usual, and especially since he's coming back and looked back to MVP candidate form, he's been averaging a 30-point triple-double on a 30% usage rate, which is the lowest of his career since his rookie season. Also, the percentage of his shots that are unassisted is at 66%, which is down from it being between 78 and 86% in 2021 to 2024. Not saying he's Steph Curry or anything, but I can do to try and slow the change of narratives of him being a selfish ball hog, LOL. First of all, I appreciate you going to the trouble of doing all that research. This is something that I've noticed with the eye test, just periodically throughout the season, just a little bit more using Luka off the ball, not just as like a guy to run action, but as a screener. He's coming off in advantage situations a lot of like seals around the elbow where they're trying to generate rim protection with his size, fighting for position rather than trying to do it off the dribble, coming off of off-ball action rather than having him just dribble into a ball screen. We're going to talk a little bit further about this in a Warriors question that we have. I think it's 2 questions down the list. But like, there's this obsession with the idea that like it's like motion offense or like spread pick and roll. And it's like, really, motion offense includes a lot of the same concepts as spread pick and roll, just in a design that is supposed to keep everybody involved. And so, like, you can still be Luka and be what makes Luka great without needing to dribble the ball up the floor slowly into a ball screen every single time. And so they're still going to do that. Like, I don't think Dallas needs to ditch that look. I think that's a valuable look, especially when you're trying to strangle the pace of games. But it's good to be able to do both. You want to be able to be like, hey, we're a little stagnant. This isn't working. Let's go to more of our ball and player movement stuff. Or it's like, hey, we got a matchup we really like. Let's just keep spamming this because Luke is killing this guy. You know, having the ability to go back and forth is going to be the path to the promised land for the Dallas Mavericks. This is the only troll we're responding to today, and it's not because he's a troll. It's just because I want to clarify something that I have to periodically clarify because people don't pay attention to some of the criteria that I release earlier in the season. Not having the Knicks in the top 10 of power rankings when their season-long net rating and record are at the top of the league, they are the best offense in the NBA, and their recent stretch has been elite. This is just bad analysis. So again, our power rankings are not intended to be contender rankings or just a clear in a vacuum set of who the best teams in the regular season have been. It is a opportunity for us to shine a light on teams who are playing well as of late. So it's kind of like a combination of like 3 factors, like 1, who's having the best regular season, 2, who's been playing the best in like the last 2 weeks or so, and 3, hey, here's a team we haven't had a chance to talk about in a little while. They're kind of up for debate around that 9-10 spot. Let's get them in there, right? So like that's kind of the purpose of my power rankings. I understand that that's different than a lot of people do it. But to me, I want to have that power rankings list be an opportunity for us to celebrate teams that are playing good basketball in the regular season, even over small bursts sometimes. So at the bottom of the rankings this week, the Miami Heat were a team that I wanted to shine a light on. We hadn't talked about them a lot. I had watched a few of their games in the previous week. They'd been playing better basketball. I wanted to shine a light on them. The other team the teams that were kind of like fighting for that 9-10 spot for me were like the Knicks, the Warriors, and the Heat. The Warriors have 8 wins against teams that are 500 or better, and the Knicks have 5 wins against teams that are 500 or better. That was what gave Golden State the edge for me. And again, I just wanted to shine a light on Miami. New York is considerably higher than that in my contender rankings, which are strictly meant to reflect my belief on who has the best chance to win a championship. So again, I'm just going to periodically do that after Monday shows, just to remind people that we have a criteria and a system that we use here, and just for the people that missed it earlier in the season. Next question. Why don't the Warriors use pick and roll more often? Seems like when they stick to Steve Kerr's motion offense, they get bogged down and can't generate anything. When they stick to simple pick and roll, it seems like everything opens up. We saw this in their win versus the Rockets. Heavy pick and roll with Kuminga and Wiggins. Then their loss versus Minnesota, motion offense return. Then in their win versus Minnesota, back to more pick and roll. Am I missing something? Is Steve Kerr missing something? Thanks. Love the show. This is something that I've seen a certain segment of Warriors fans complaining a lot about over the last couple of years. And I really think it's silly and frankly kind of a misunderstanding of a basic basketball principle, which is what I talked about earlier when we were talking about Dallas. In the motion offense, if you have a guy, like if you have a 5-out setup and you got Draymond at the top of the key and you have, let's call it Brandon Podziemski on the right wing and Steph Curry in the right corner, and you're running your flow from side to side, you're thinking of it as a motion offense. A bunch of guys moving, cutting, screening, blah, 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 blah. Yes, but at its core, it's the same concept of what's happening in a pick and roll, right? In a pick and roll, Steph brings the ball up the floor, gets a screen, hopefully gets his defender in trail position, hopefully brings the big up to the level of the screen so that he can hit the guy slipping to the basket. If they don't show at the level of the screen with the screen defender, then Steph can come off and look to shoot. Right? So that's the advantage of the pick and roll. There's one other advantage as it pertains to dealing with top blocking and denial, but which we'll get to that in just a second. But if you zoom in on a motion offense, if Brandon Podziemski runs down and screens in like a Chicago action for Steph coming out of the corner and it flows into a dribble handoff with Draymond Green at the top of the key, it is still fundamentally the same concept. Steph's defender, in all likelihood, is going to be trailing him over the top of the screen. Draymond's defender is going to show at the level of the screen. Draymond is going to slip out of it. So even though it's a Chicago action instead of a spread pick and roll, the same fundamental concept of a 2-man game is taking place. It's actually technically more of a 3-man game because you're setting a screen for Steph before at the beginning. So let's look at the Warriors split cuts. Okay, you make a post entry to Draymond. Then Brandon Podziemski makes the post entry. Steph Curry's at the top of the key. Podziemski sets a screen for Steph coming off towards the ball handler to try to get him a look, or the opposite of that, right? Well, let's talk it through. Steph's defender probably going to chase Steph in a lock and trail, right? His defender screens for him when his teammate screens for him. That screen defender is likely going to show on Steph. And if they botch that, there's an opportunity to slip for the screener. Again, fundamentally, the exact same concept that happens in a pick and roll. It's just happening within the flow with everybody involved. So this is where it gets a little more complicated. When you're running Steph off ball, there are downsides. Those downsides tend to be things like being really handsy and holding Steph. Top blocking, meaning like Steph's in the corner and he's getting ready to come off of that Chicago action. What if his defender just literally sits on Steph's top side so that he has no choice but to back cut into the lane, right? Like there are denials, physical off-ball defense, all those sorts of things can disrupt the motion offense, right? But the same can be said about the pick and roll. So the idea would be, okay, they're denying Steph the ball. We're having trouble getting him the ball in the motion offense. Okay, let's get him the ball in the backcourt and have him dribble up the floor into a ball screen, okay? Now he has to navigate ball pressure. That adds a layer of fatigue on the ball as Steph has to navigate ball pressure up the court. You think the same team that would top lock and grab and hold and be super physical with Steph off ball is just going to let him dribble the ball seamlessly up the floor into action? No, they're probably going to ball pressure him, be physical, the same sort of issues, right? And there's also a downside that comes with that, which is the rhythm of the inflow of the entire offense. If Steph runs that Chicago action and he comes off and it's not open, there's all of these like counters and additional layers to it so that they can keep flowing from side to side, right? in the event that you're just running spread pick and roll every time down the floor, you're basically admitting that no one else is going to be in rhythm. You're basically admitting that this is now the Steph show. Whereas if you're trying to make sure that you have some consistent contributions down the roster, everyone's got to get touches, everyone's got to get opportunity. And by the way, the last time in the playoffs, I saw them lean super heavily into ball screens. If you remember, it was in that Lakers series in the second round. That was a series where they didn't get any consistent contributions down the roster. Klay Thompson in particular really struggled in that series, in large part because the Warriors just went to a lot of spread pick and roll. Now, that team was so damaged offensively down the roster with how much Klay was struggling, with how much Jordan Poole was struggling. That may or may not have been their best option in that specific situation. There was also some game plan stuff the Lakers were doing that was disrupting it. But the point is, Steve Kerr wants to stick with the motion as much as possible because, one, fundamentally, it's the same concept as a ball screen. It's just coming out of real ball and player movement. And two, it provides the best opportunity to continue to keep everyone involved. I would also argue that the motion offense generates a lot of really easy shots in a way that kind of flies under the radar. How many times a game do you see Steph just sprint from under the basket out to the perimeter and the guy who's guarding his screener is just standing wide, or the guy who is guarding his screener just goes with Steph and the screener's just standing wide open under the basket? That happens like 5 or 6 times a game. Like that's 10 to 12 points that you're getting every game by running the motion offense. Like any sort of perceived increase in efficiency from spread pick and roll is kind of countered by that. Now, again, as I talked about with Dallas, you want to be able to do both because certain situations call for it. But there's a very specific reason why Steve Kerr is doing both. And it's because you need to be able to do both in order to win a championship. And again, like one of the things is like it would be nice to have a second option in those situations so that you can run spread pick and roll with Steph, but you could also run a spread pick and roll with the second player or two-man game with those two guys in action at the top of the key, just like him and KD used to run, right? You want to be able to do both. And then when you run your motion, if you've got a second high-level threat in the motion, that increases the efficiency of that offense there as well. Hey, Jason, obviously no stats can fully capture the nuances of what leads to wins and losses, but what would you say are the best metrics that correlate with success in today's NBA? Huge fan of the show, thanks. So I am really, really anti-catch-alls. I have a feeling, my personal belief is that basketball is far too complicated to be able to just like distill everything down to one specific number to capture an entire side of the floor. There's a lot of complications that are involved there. So like I look more at some of the more detailed data surrounding like specific basketball situations. So a 5-on-5 game has so many basketball battles, so many basketball situations taking place that it's too difficult to distill down to one number. But in any one spot on the floor, there's one or two things that are happening that are less complicated, that are a little bit easier to quantify. That's where I try to hunt down some numbers. So I'll give you guys an example, some stats that I use. So like per possession stats, this is specifically in play types, right? So like, for instance, like how well does a player convert spot up situations? That means it's a combination of your ability to hit catch and shoot threes and your ability to drive it, close out, and score in those situations, right? And by the way, none of these are perfect either. Even a per possession spot up piece of data doesn't quantify for playmaking. It doesn't quantify for what if you catch, pump fake, beat your man off the dribble, and drop it off to a guy for a dunk at the basket. That doesn't quantify in spot up points per possession, right? So that's even a flawed piece of data. But again, we're looking for data with less flaws by getting more concise. So like spot up possessions, I really like it in shot creation situations. So like pick and roll, post up, ISO. Synergy has a version of that includes passes, so it's a little bit more detailed than some of the stuff I see with spot ups, but those are important pieces of play type data. I even like looking at play type data by location. So for instance, like certain players are much better posting up on the left block than they are posting up on the right block. Some players, have more success running pick and roll in the middle of the floor than they do on the side of the floor. Like there's a bunch of like different aspects there. And that's valuable data because if you find out like, hey, let's say that Paolo Banchero is far more efficient as a post player on the left block because he can get to his left shoulder hook in the lane. Well, okay, then we need to make sure that we're running our offense so that we get Paolo touches on the left block as much as possible. We don't want to just be running left, right, left, right, left, right if he's 0.3 of a point more efficient per possession if we put him on the left block. So like you want to like pay attention to those sorts of things. Score percentage, I talked about this yesterday. Basically the idea of like distilling efficiency down to like how likely are we to score on this possession. This throws an extra level of value on players that get high percentage field goal percentage shots or get to the foul line a lot, because again, that is more valuable on a single possession basis rather than the large sample. In the large sample, I want per possession stats. Like how efficient is this guy if I let him run 500 pick and rolls over the course of the season as like a secondary shot creator? Okay, well, I've got these 500 pick and rolls that I need to give to somebody. Do I want to give them to Gabe Vincent, or do I want to give them to, a guy like Jalen Hood-Schifino or just something like that, right? Well, as I look at this, each guy's run 100 pick and rolls so far this year. Gabe's been more efficient. Maybe we lean into him a little bit more for those like secondary shot creation opportunities, right? Like that's the large sample points per possession stat. At the end of games, though, when you're trying to win 5 or 6 possessions, that's where something like score percentage is more valuable, because in 5 or 6 possessions, if I have a score percentage over 50%, I can count on myself scoring 2 or 3 buckets over that span. Whereas if I'm a high per possession guy, but I rely on a lot of tougher 3-point shots, then my score percentage is going to be closer to the mid-30s. And now I might only get a bucket on 1 or 2 of those possessions, and it kind of affects the value there, right? Defensive rating. I look at it more as an indicator of overall effort and commitment to attention to detail over the course of the regular season. There are a lot of really good defenses there are a lot of really bad defenses that put up good defensive ratings over the course of the regular season. To me, that is an indicator of their overall level of focus and attention to detail. So I do think that's important. By the way, that's why the vast majority of teams in NBA history that win the title, the vast, vast, vast majority have top 10 defensive ratings. Denver was an exception. The vast, vast majority have top 10 defensive ratings. And the reason why is because that is an overall indicator of how well they attack the regular season from start to finish. Half-court offensive and defensive rating. I look at this as a cleaning the glass stat. I look at this one a lot simply because it is an example of what happens when the game gets strangled into the half-court, which is something that happens more frequently in the postseason. Even bad transition defenses do a better job of running back in the playoffs. They can still get burned in transition. I've seen teams lose series in transition. I've seen teams win the title running in transition, like the 2021 Milwaukee Bucks or the 2020 Los Angeles Lakers, right? Like there are lots of teams that thrive in transition offensively, but half-court offensive and defensive rating is like, we're in this strangled, slow-down situation. Who's going to have an easier time generating shots? So that would be a piece that I look at. Points per shot on various shot types. So like, I look at like, how good is this player at making a floater or a hook in terms of like big guys on the roll, especially centers. Like a center that's got a hook shot that he can make 55% of the time, I think that's high value, right? Layups is a big one. Because there's a lot of guys that when they get dunks, they can make it, but when they get anything that's a touch shot around the rim, they struggle to finish. That's a problem. The difference between unguarded catch-and-shoot jump shots versus guarded catch-and-shoot jump shots. The difference between off the dribble and face-up jump shots versus catch-and-shoot jump shots. Looking at all of that data, I can see where specific players thrive as shot makers and where they have gaping holes in shot making where they need to improve. That's a piece of data that I like. Lineup data. This is, again, like trying to capture that science as best as you can. So, like, it's every single basketball lineup is like this intricately connected, like, group of strengths and weaknesses, right? And it kind of pieces together to make a certain type of success or failure on the basketball court that can be captured by lineup data. Again, never something you want to take as like as the end all be all, but it's a piece of information you should look at. Oh, these 3 guys always seem to play well together. We should lean into that more. For the last month, we've been playing these 3 guys and they've been sucking. Okay, maybe we need to mix it up a little bit. That's where lineup data can have advantage. But again, those are just some examples of data that I look at a lot. Last season, Luka had the best season of his career stat-wise, 34 points per game, 9 rebounds, almost 10 assists, top 10 steals, is a league top scorer, but did not get enough votes because the Mavs only finished 5th, despite having 50 wins in a loaded West. Just like Westbrook when he won his MVP with OKC, finishing only 6th in the West, and Jokic when he only won his second MVP with the Nuggets, finishing likewise at 6th. Jokic could probably win another one even if the Nuggets are currently struggling at 7th. So does winning a lot matter or not? As Nick Wright just pointed out a few days ago, the MVP narrative criteria keeps changing. I agree with Nick Wright on that. First of all, you guys have noticed I periodically will mention MVP or talk a little bit about MVP, but I'm not a big MVP guy. One of the main reasons why is because the criteria has shifted so many times over the years. It's so much a narrative contest. There are like substantial chunks of the MVP voter base who legitimately just look at advanced metrics or that allow advanced metrics like catch-alls to be the determining factor in their vote. I think that's fucking insane. So like I distance myself from that debate as much as possible because it just frustrates me. I tend to agree though that like, especially when you look at the Western Conference, and actually let's just skip to the next question for this. What is the lowest seed the Nuggets can be for Jokic to still earn his 4th MVP if Jokic keeps averaging a massive triple-double? So the way I look at it personally for me with MVP, it's a combination of a bunch of factors. It's a combination of like who's playing the best basketball, who's the most valuable to their team, and who's playing on the best team. So it's a combination of all those factors. So if you look at it, who's playing the best basketball, I'm looking specifically at like just overall in a vacuum basketball impact. Jokic is dominating that for me right now, okay? Who's the most valuable to their team? Well, Jokic is, just watch the Nuggets. It's very clear that Jokic is the most valuable to his specific team. Like, I'm a big Luka Doncic fan. The Mavs have been pretty good without him this year, right? So that's something that works against him to a certain extent. They have a very good roster. I think Dallas is a better team than Denver. I think Dallas has a better roster than Denver. I would pick Dallas over Denver in a playoff series as of right now. So, like, that's a big part of that, right? And then the best team part, I think Dallas will have an edge there. I think they'll finish higher in the standings, right? So if Luka wanted to win an MVP based on my voting, he would need to get closer to matching Jokic's overall level of impact, which right now is a 35-point triple-double or whatever the hell it is. And then he's going to need to demonstrate such a high level of play with the Mavs that there is a little bit of a drop-off compared to when he's off the floor. He's capable of doing that, right? As far as the Western Conference goes, though, stop looking at seeding. I don't care about seeding. The West is too stacked. You could be a 5 or 6 seed out West and win 50 games, okay? So, like, to me, it doesn't make sense to split hairs there. If there's a 2 seed that has 53 wins and a 6 seed that has 50 wins, and the guy who's leading the 6 seed is a better basketball player who's having a better season, who is more valuable to that 50 wins than the other guy is to his 2 seed 53 wins, I think that guy who won 50 games should be the guy who gets the award. So again, it's a complicated combination of a bunch of factors. I do agree with you, though, that over-indexing on the standings is silly when we're only talking about a couple of games in a really jam-packed conference. I'd like your opinion on what the Nuggets should do. Is there a missing piece they could grab at the deadline? Do they need better coaching or scheme on defense? I'm not seeing anything on the coaching/scheme front. This happens with a lot of teams after they start to have success, where it's like there's a huge chunk of Warriors fans that think Steve Kerr is a bad coach. Like, I just could not disagree more. I think he's the 2nd or 3rd best coach in the entire NBA. I think Mike Malone is a top 5 coach. I've seen a lot of Nuggets fans complaining about Mike Malone. So, like, this is a typical thing that happens. It's like the burden of success, right? You become really good, you have high expectations, and then you start looking for people to blame when you don't reach those expectations. So I don't really go down that route as it pertains to the list of guys at the top of the league. Again, for me, that's like Ty Lue, Eric Spoelstra, Steve Kerr, Mike Malone. Like, there's a bunch of guys in that, Mark Dagnall. There's a bunch of guys in that tier, in that like top 10 group of coaches where I think that there's going to be a lot of criticism of them that's misplaced just because their teams have such high expectations. Also, even the best coaches in the world are going to make decisions that are 50-50 calls that if they go wrong could be criticized. But like, if you're in that position, you can't say that you wouldn't make the same decision. And it's a difficult decision on its face to begin with. And now you're just playing the results. As far as the Nuggets go, the problem is that in order to go about getting real offensive reinforcements, like similar to what we talked about with the Warriors, just like another reliable 20-plus point per game scorer, which the Nuggets have not been getting because of Michael Porter Jr. being Michael Porter Jr. and Jamal Murray just not having a very good season, right? But in order to go about getting one of those higher level players, if I'm another team, I'm asking for a Christian Brown or a Peyton Watson in that deal. And those two guys have become vitally important to making this whole situation work. And so with the Nuggets, their best bet is continued improvement in the roster. You got to cross your fingers and pray that Jamal Murray gets it back together. That's not to say you don't keep your eyes open on the market, and if a good opportunity comes up, you jump on it. Of course, I'm just saying there's going to be a lot of people looking to buy at the trade market this year, and Denver's going to have to give up a lot to get what they want. And at this point, I think their better option is to just hope for internal improvement. You said you're not concerned with the amount of three-point shooting because you think defenses will evolve and guard the three-point line better. How do you expect defenses to mold over the next 5 years to guard the three-point line better? Thanks for the content. Love the show. I think it's going to mostly come down to what teams do in rotation. As speed becomes more at the forefront of what makes modern NBA defense successful, I think we're going to see a lot more aggression with really sharp backside rotations. So in theory, even when you double team, as soon as the guy who has the ball gives it up, there is a sequence where if you nail it in rotation, you can get out of it. So for instance, let's say it's a post-up double team, and there's a passer on the left wing, he drops the ball to the post, and maybe they run a little split cut, clear out whatever it is. Now the guy's posting on the left block. If he draws a second defender, you can set it up so that the only opening is the skip pass on the weak side. And you can have it set up as well because there's usually a guy in a dunker spot in that situation, or a guy setting a pin and flare, somebody around the opposite kind of short corner area. If you have a good defender in that spot who's being active with his hands, it'll have to be a lob. If it has to be a lob, then there's a chance to rotate. And if you're really sharp in your rotations and everyone quickly spreads out to where they're supposed to go, the advantage can be gone. And so whether it's a 4-on-3 in a ball screen or a 4-on-3 in a post up or whatever it is, I do eventually think teams will get better and better and better at rotating out of those situations, and that will be something that takes away shots at the three-point line. And then what will happen is the teams offensively that thrive are the teams that stay with their ball and player movement, that stay difficult to guard in rotation by not just standing in single spots and waiting for guys to close out at them. But again, I think most of the defensive approach to guarding the three-point line will center around just really, really sharp rotations and closeouts. All right, we'll do a couple more. Let's see. Hey, Jason, love the pod. It's my daily watch. I have a mailbag question that I for sure need your take on more than any other analyst out there. I want your take on another pod's take on Gobert's value. To sum it up, the take was defensive versatility is undervalued and rim protection is overvalued. What do you think about that? I agree. Defensive versatility is undervalued and rim protection is overvalued. What that means to me is if you have a guy like Joel Embiid, to me is the case study for this. If Joel Embiid can sit in a deep drop coverage and play in the half court all night long, then he's one of the best defenders in the league. But as soon as the game enters into a phase where there's a lot of transition play or where he has to cover ground on the perimeter, he becomes a bad defender. And that's an example of rim protection that is not defensively versatile and thus a weakness. That said, I think Gobert is defensively versatile and is a rim protector. All of my concerns with Rudy Gobert stem on the offensive end of the floor and his ability to ever catch a damn thing around the basket and finish it unless it's an easy dunk. He struggles on offense. It limits the Minnesota Timberwolves. That's the criticism of Gobert that makes sense to me. On the defensive end, Rudy Gobert is one of the best rim protectors in the league while also being one of the best bigs that can defend out on the perimeter and defend in a bunch of different circumstances. I don't understand the criticism of Rudy as a defensive player. Hi, Jason. Love the show, by the way. What do you think the Grizzlies need to become a true championship contender? Time and repetition. At this point, talent is not an issue. Depth is not an issue. It's just a simple case of Ja Morant, Jaren Jackson, Desmond Bane. These guys need continuity, lots of repetition, lots of experience, lots of big games under their belt so that they can get to where they need to get as individual basketball players to carry a team to a title. Memphis, to me, has all the ingredients as long as there's internal improvement. So that is John Morant becoming more consistent as a pull-up jump shooter so that teams can't just pack the paint on him in ball screens. Jaren Jackson just becoming a more reliable version of what he's been the last few weeks, which is a guy that can really knock down threes and hit hook shots over both shoulders against size mismatches in the post, right? Tying all of that together. And then there's a scar tissue element, right? I talk about this a lot. Failure breeds a fear of losing. A fear of losing breeds better attention to detail. Better attention to detail carries you in any sort of adversity that you face in the postseason. So there's a lot of opportunity to get better through loss in a lot of ways. And so it might take 2-3 years for Memphis with this group to get to where they need to be. But right now, you just got to let them play. And guys got to stay healthy. They got to stay on the court, and they need lots of repetition and experience together. Last question. Why is it you consider Luka better than Giannis? Giannis has the championship edge, multiple MVPs, Defensive Player of the Year trophy, All-NBA defensive teams, and actually competes on defense while being the league's leading scorer. Not sure there's ever been a time in the NBA when a guy with those accolades at the peak of his powers isn't considered top 2 in the world. Luka's 30/40-point triple-doubles are awesome, but that would be like putting prime James Harden over LeBron simply because of the offensive volume of stats in a heliocentric offense. Usually their teams fall short in the postseason due to their awful defense. So Giannis is having a better season than Luka this year. Last year, Luka had a better season because he came on super strong at the end, and he had a much better playoff run because Giannis got hurt again. So here's the thing. If Giannis finishes this season playing the way he's playing and then has a more impressive playoff run than Luka, then he will take that spot back. To me, last year, I thought Luka was better. Luka has been playing really well since he came back, been getting closer to that Giannis Jokic level, and I think he'll stay there, and it'll be a more complicated debate. As a basketball concept, though, simply put, as I've said many times, it is much easier to cover for defensive deficiencies in a star through scheme and through defensive role players and allowing your offensive superpower to carry over the top than it is to do the reverse, which is to have a star that is a defensive-minded player, but then to try to have to cover for his offensive weaknesses. It's a lot harder to just find a Damian Lillard lying around somewhere for you to bring in to run your offense in big late game situations. Now, for the record, Giannis has been pretty good this year, even as an over-the-top shot maker. He's a better half-court player than he's ever been in his career. Giannis is having a great season. It's December 10th, though. I'm going to wait for a whole season before we start having big picture topics about who a player might be better. That's why we do player rankings in August and September and not in the middle of the season. So hopefully that explains that for you guys. All right, that's all I have for today. As always, I sincerely appreciate you guys for supporting me and supporting the show. We'll be back tomorrow with a breakdown of the in-season tournament games with some film. I'll see you guys then.